This lesson is for bias-based profiling. Bias-based or racial profiling is a constant accusation that has long plagued law enforcement. From the early ages of law enforcement until today, profiling has become something that is synonymous with officers in the eyes of the public. Although not all people feel that they are profiled, many who deal with the police feel like they have been targeted because of who they are. Although a very minor portion of police encounters with others are based on this, many feel that they just cannot trust the police. One bias-based profiling incident can ruin the reputation of a law enforcement agency. A reputation that has taken years to build can be destroyed by one foolish action by one foolish officer. While this may not be an issue in our area, we have to understand that in many areas of the country, this has led to major problems. The terminal performance objective for this lesson is given a police-citizen encounter. The officer will be able to identify the proper way to avoid allegations of a bias-based profiling incident. Our enabling objectives are to define bias, identify the reasons for bias, define bias-based and racial profiling, discuss department policies that apply to bias-based profiling. So in order to understand exactly what we're talking about in this lesson, let's look at bias in general. What is bias? Bias is defined as an unfair preference or dislike of something. So it's an unfair preference for or a dislike of something. This can be related back to pretty much anything. If you think about what you're biased against, it could be anything from a sports team. It could be anything from anything to do with food, something like that. So we all have some type of bias already built into us based on our personal preferences and based on exactly how we were raised, maybe what school we went to, something like that. So there's a lot of different reasons for bias and why people are biased against one thing or the other. Bias is derived from and developed based on several different factors. Some of the examples that we want to look at as far as law enforcement could be related. Some of the things that people could be biased against would be someone's race, someone's ethnicity, creed, nationality, or their religion. And there's several different reasons for this. Could be the way that someone was raised, could be the way that someone has had a bad experience with someone, and it could create a bias in their mind. But we just have to understand how to manage that, and we'll look at that later on in the lesson. There's many different definitions of profiling. If you look at racial profiling, it's a little bit different than just bias profiling in general. Bias-based profiling is the term bias-based profiling in a whole is talking about many forms of something that an individual may be bias against. Racial profiling is just dealing with race. So if we look at the definition of racial profiling, we see that it refers to the use of an individual's race or ethnicity by law enforcement personnel as a key factor in deciding whether to engage in enforcement. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, racial profiling refers to the discriminatory practice by law enforcement officials of targeting individuals for suspicion of crime based on the individual's race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin. So they kind of break it down a little bit more as far as what they classify as racial profiling. In our policy, we define bias-based profiling, and according to our policy, bias-based profiling is any law enforcement activity initiated solely on the common trait of a group. This includes, but is not limited to, race, ethnic background, gender, sexual orientation, religion, economic status, age, cultural group, or any other identifiable group. And so if you look at the definition that we put in policy, it breaks it down even more than the other two definitions that we look at, and there's a lot more classifications in this definition. So what is our policy on bias-based profiling? Our policy is to ensure that illegal profiling or discrimination is not practiced by any member of the department. The members of the Dalton Police Department shall treat all citizens in an equal, fair, and legal manner during all citizen contacts. And this is important for everyone to understand, from someone that's been here for a month or someone that's been here for 25 years, that we're going to treat everyone the same, no matter what their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or anything is. The procedure outlined in our policy is officers shall not engage in any illegal profiling or any type of illegal discrimination practice, to include but not limited to during traffic contacts, field contacts, asset seizure, and forfeiture efforts. So make sure that that you're maintaining yourself in a professional way. And again, this is going to fall right back to ethics as well, which we'll talk about in another lesson. In our procedures, officers may consider traits that are commonly shared with a group when making a citizen contact only when they possess reliable information that is likely to lead to the detection of an individual who is suspected of a specific crime. And then it outlines the punishment in our policy. And in our policy, officers that participate in bias-based profiling or discrimination practices are subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal. All corrective measures will be handled in accordance with 2.14, which is the rules of conduct. And officers that participate in these types of activities may also face civil and criminal liability. Bias-based profiling or discrimination cannot and will not be tolerated. And if you look at that last sentence in that on that slide that's in front of you, bias-based profiling or discrimination cannot and will not be tolerated. I think that's a pretty firm statement made by the agency, saying that it's not going to be put up with any kind of activity like this based on an individual's race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, will not be tolerated. So I think that's pretty clear on exactly what that means. If you look at the Fourth Amendment, and you look at the U.S. Constitution and you look at the Fourth Amendment, we're familiar with this as far as search and seizure and talking about making entry into a residence maybe, or using force. We talk about the Fourth Amendment. But think about an unreasonable seizure of an individual based on race, ethnicity, and things like that. So the Fourth Amendment does get brought up quite a bit for any type of allegation that someone has for a bias-based profiling incident. The Fourth Amendment says it provides that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And again, I think that's pretty clear on exactly what that means, and I think we're all familiar enough with the Fourth Amendment to see exactly where they're going with that. In 1968, there was a Fourth Amendment ruling in Terry v. Ohio, and we're all familiar with this as far as talking about a Terry Pat or a Terry Frisk. The Supreme Court found that reasonable articulable suspicion, or ARS, articulable reasonable suspicion as we refer to it, was sufficient grounds for a police officer to briefly stop and question a citizen. Such suspicion must not be based on the officer's any kind of hunch or any kind of just unparticularized suspicion. It has to be based on reasonable articulable suspicion, something you can really articulate, specific things in which entitled to draw from the facts in light of your experience. Terry employed a totality of the circumstances test to determine the reasonableness of police investigatory stops, and so we have to keep that in mind, that we have to have some type of reason to be doing certain things, and that falls back under a Tier 2 encounter. And again, we'll talk about Tier 1, 2, and 3 encounters in another lesson. But if you look at if you kind of live in that when you're out there working and dealing with individuals, as far as the type of encounter you're having, you're going to be a lot better. So remember, a Tier 1 encounter is just a consensual encounter. The person is free to leave at any time. Tier 2 encounter is going to be anything to where maybe it's an investigatory stop. Terry Pat falls under this. You've got some reason to stop this person and continue questioning them, but you've not reached the level of probable cause to make an arrest yet. And then a Tier 3 is an arrest or probable cause, and probable cause is necessary there. The next one is the 14th Amendment. and this says that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And again, I think that's pretty clear and pretty self-explanatory about what they're what the intent of that was. So any type of allegation of a bias-based profiling incident, someone maybe accuses us of bias-based profiling, it's going to happen in the profession that we do. Inevitably, we're going to be accused of some type of profiling at some time during our career. The way we handle that complaint is crucial to not only our careers but the other officers that we work with. Remember, there's always videotapes out there, always recordings, either in your patrol car or by a cell phone. It doesn't take long to go to YouTube and look up videos of where people have video recorded a police encounter. A lot of times the people aren't even involved. It's just some passerby, and they have you on camera saying something, or have an officer on camera. So how we present ourselves and do all that on a regular basis is really, really important. So if you're accused or someone says that you're profiling them, first of all, you should respond by maintaining your composure. Don't just because there's an allegation there, that person is saying that you're profiling them based on their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, whatever the case may be. Maintain your composure. Second of all, remain acting ethically and morally. And then lastly, refer the person to the appropriate agency or agency representative for any type of further complaints. Don't get into an argument out on the side of the street or at the residence where you're at. If they have a complaint about something, feel free to, or you should refer them to the agency contact. So in this lesson, we've talked about bias-based profiling, and we have defined bias. We have identified the reasons for bias. We have defined bias-based and racial profiling. And we've also discussed departmental policies that apply to bias-based profiling. If you have any additional questions on this topic or would like to see some additional information, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. Thanks.